Okay, let's run.
Your mission, should you choose to accept it.
It's a quest. It's a quest for fun.
Well, The Rock says, why don't we just cut right to the chase?
Okay, now he wants to get together. Well, he wants to talk.
I want you to do me a favor. I want you to tell all your friends about me.
It's showtime, folks!
What are you?
Greetings and salutations. Welcome to And I Quotes, the weekly show where we introduce you to content creators of all shapes and sizes that join us from many and all corners of the nerd universe. We find out more about them and we take your questions. I am your host, Ryan of Nerd Culture, and our guest this week is writer, podcaster, and apparently he's got stories for days about DragonCon. Please welcome Van Allen Plexico to the set. Van, how are you, kind sir?
Hey, Ryan. Thank you for having me. It's very good. Yeah, it's funny. On our Babylon 5 podcast, we always have a joke. We'll see if we can go the entire show without me mentioning DragonCon, and it usually doesn't work.
It usually doesn't work. Well, hey, you try, and that's all you can do. Or as Master Yoda would say, there is do or do not, because there is no try. But in this case, thank you for being with us. If you have any questions for Van Allen Plexico during the course of this episode, let us know in the comments. Let us know in the chat. Be more than happy to hear from you. If this is your first time here, welcome and thank you for being with us. And don't forget to like and share this with all of your closest friends. Van, what would you say were some of your favorite books and or writers growing up?
My favorite books and writers growing up, probably, all-time number one, people that know me know this very well, Roger Zelazny, the Amber books. I've read most of his other work, but the Amber books were what really, got me going at the beginning. And then early on, I think Larry Niven, the Ring World stuff, the known space stuff, those kind of things. So I was really heavy into science fiction and a little bit of fantasy, as a preteen and teenager. It's broadened tremendously since then, obviously, but those were the things I was really, really, really loving back when I was a kid. And then I just read a ton of comics also.
Ooh, okay. Well, what would you say were some of your favorite comic books growing up or favorite characters?
Well, it's funny, when I was a little kid, I ended up somehow with like Richie Rich comics and the Walt Disney Donald Duck and Uncle Scrooge and all that. But somewhere in 1977 or thereabouts, somebody gave me or handed me, I don't remember how it worked out exactly, but somebody handed me a copy of Avengers 162 when they were fighting Ultron. And I mean, it's 1977. I'm seeing Star Wars in the theater. And I'm reading Avengers with George Perez and Jim Shooter writing it and drawing it, fighting Ultron. It was just and then that summer, the Avengers annual where they fought Thanos comes out in the Marvel 2-in-1 annual. And so, I mean, talk about the perfect summer of just sci-fi superhero and that was really my first exposure to all that stuff as a little kid. And so I absolutely fell over in love with Marvel and Iron Man in particular. And so I've been an Avengers and an Iron Man. I mean, you can see behind me my Iron Man statue right next to Boba Fett and the plush Iron Man over here. So yeah, I'm surrounded by Iron Man and Boba Fett. So those were the things I absolutely loved the most: Iron Man and the Avengers. And then after that, a lot of other things, And I'll mention this too. Right about that same time was when the Micronauts, the Shogun Warriors, and the Godzilla comics all came out from Marvel, when they were doing a lot of licensed stuff. And I loved the Godzilla and the Shogun Warriors comics, the big Japanese monster and the big Japanese robots. And so my most recent novel, validus-v, is a novel of giant monsters and giant robots. And it just won the Best Pulp Novel of the Year award at the Windy City Pulp Con in Chicago about 3 weeks ago. So that was very gratifying. And in my acceptance speech, I thanked Doug Moench and Herb Trimpe that wrote and drew both of those comics as being the main inspiration for me doing that book, to kind of give something back that I'd love so much. So, yeah.
Wow, man, the early goings, it's fair to say you took a marvelous first step into a larger world.
Oh, indeed. Yeah, no, DC was okay too, but I was always a Marvel guy. I've always been a Marvel guy. Yeah, so.
Really, I couldn't tell by all the Iron Man swag behind you. But with that, with that being said, what would you say are some of your, what would you say were some of your favorite movies or TV series growing up?
Well, it's funny. The first really sort of genre show I remember as a little kid was $6 Million Man, and that was pretty cool because it was kind of a superhero show. It was, in fact, if you think of the $6 Million Man as a superhero, then in some ways it was one of the more successful superhero type shows for many years, right? I mean, there had been Batman and Superman type shows, but they were never quite like in the comics. They never had superpowers on TV the way we wanted to see them. You could shoot Superman, the bullets would bounce off, they'd throw the gun at him, but he never like did movie style stuff, right? Whereas here's $6 Million Man running 60 miles an hour, jumping over things, picking cars up and all, that was huge. And then the two shows that had a big impact on me that were syndicated in reruns that I would like come home after school and watch on the local Birmingham, Alabama TV station were the original Star Trek and Space 1999. And of the two, I vastly preferred Space 1999 because you'd watch Star Trek and it was fun. It had, the cool cast of characters, and they're basically superheroes too. They can fire phaser beams and they can teleport. It's just they have mechanical stuff to let them do that, but they can travel all over the galaxy. They can, they have these amazing powers. They just have futuristic equipment to let them do it. So, but Space 1999 appealed to me because it looked like stuff that could be happening right now, right? It was the mid 70s, the late 70s. We had just gone to the moon 6 times, and I had seen the last one, when I was really little. And I was thinking, what I'm seeing on space, minus the moon being blasted across the universe. Other than that, and that's a big that. But other than the moon getting thrown across the universe, everything about that show, right? Having a moon base, having the eagles that could fly around and everything, it all seemed like what NASA might do in my lifetime. And I loved that. Star Trek is fantasy, right? They go way faster than light. They can talk to aliens on other planets and all that. And that's great. But Space 1999 always seemed to me like the near future, what could happen, what I could live to see. And so obviously the last several decades have been disappointing on that scale because we redirected our money and efforts into an exploding pickup truck in space rather than going to the moon and a moon base and everything. But fortunately, I feel like maybe now we're getting back to that, right? And so hopefully before I die, I'll get to see some of the things I always thought I would see in my life. But those shows in particular, I think really kind of fired my imagination in that way, those two for sure.
Really good stuff. I'm not familiar with Space 1999. I mean, Star Trek's been around for decades upon decades upon decades upon decades, but that other one I wasn't overly familiar with. But thanks for informing us about that. Greatly appreciate it. When did you decide to become a writer?
Probably before kindergarten. The first story or book I wrote, I was like probably 3 or 4 years old, and I couldn't actually write yet. So I dictated it to my dad and my sister. They wrote it down for me. I think it involved a rabbit running around in a magical forest or something. But I wish I still had it. But I inherited my granddad's manual typewriter when I was probably in junior high, and I started writing books and stuff on that, which was a chore. But I was determined to do it, and it sure got a lot easier when computers came along. And so I don't think there's ever been a time I haven't been at least trying to write stuff. There was a moment I'd never had anything published and hadn't written a whole lot that was worthy. I did in like 9th grade mail off a manuscript to Timescape Books. That's Pocket Books sci-fi imprint back then. And they sent me back a lovely letter. So they actually read it, which was amazing because I was like 14 or something, 13 or 14. So I've got that still around here somewhere. But Really, it was about. I started writing a couple of things in the 90s, and it was around 2002, 2003, 2004 that I decided to really make an effort at it. And so I wrote a whole novel. My first whole novel I wrote was called Lucian, Dark God's Homecoming, and it got rejected by a couple of agents, and so it kind of went in the box. And then my friend Bobby Polite and I started writing superhero adventures, and neither one of us could draw. So the first thing that we really wrote that was successful were the Sentinels novels. He sort of co-plotted them with me at first, and then I wrote the actual prose out. And those got bought by Swarm Press, an imprint of Permuted, the zombie press. They were doing superhero stuff there. And so two other writers and I got our superhero fiction published by them, and that was huge, right? That was when I first, here you go, first warning, that was when I first got invited to DragonCon as a pro, because I had been published by Swarm Press, the superhero stuff, and that was back in like 2008. And then after 2008, after the Sentinels book started coming out, there have been 9 of them now between 2008 and 2017. After that started happening, I went back and realized that there were now over the, well, here's what's interesting. Let me back up and flesh this out for you. So in like 2000, there was still just traditional publishing. So you either had a company buy your work and they published it, or you paid somebody to publish your, vanity press. That was pretty much your options. By the mid 2000s, that publishing model had gone out the door, gone. It's completely changed, right? Because in the mid 2000s, you got print on demand. And so you could start your own publishing company. Anybody could. You could self-publish. You could publish other people. And so a lot of small press publishing start coming up. And Airship 27 was one of them. They bought Lucian. They really liked it, right? So it finally found its audience. And that's been one of my most popular books. So then I had the Sentinels books coming out from Swarm, and I had Lucian coming out from Airship 27. And then at the end of that decade, you had Kindle and Nook, the ebooks, which is basically modern pulp, right? Back in the 20s, 30s, 40s, action adventure stories were published in the cheapest way possible, which is pulp paper. Cheapest way to get the story out. Today, the cheapest way to get the story out is ebook. And so Kindle and ebook and all that have become today's pulp, and that's where you find a lot of the new pulp stuff. And so I do a lot of stuff for the new pulp publishers now. And I have my own company as well that publishes my stuff sometimes and other people's stuff as well. So it really is a different world now than it was 20 years ago, and it's opened up so many doors for so many people.
Well, it is true what they say: teamwork makes the dream work. So I would venture to say I would definitely say that is true. And once again, we are talking with Van Allen Plexico, indie writer and podcaster, on this episode of Van Dyke Quote. Don't forget to like and share this with all of your closest friends. If you have any questions for Van, please let us know in the comments. Let us know in the chat. If this is your first time here, welcome, and we're glad that you are with us. What would you say are some of the biggest rewards about being a writer?
Well, I mean, the primary thing about being a writer is just getting to tell the stories that are inside of you that have just got to come out, right? I mean, on a purely personal level, I would do it if I didn't make any money doing it. I did for a long time. It's about, you soak up lots and lots of influences. You get lots and lots of ideas. The pieces kind of percolate around and come together into new things. And you want to tell those stories. You think of characters. You want people to know those characters. You think of stories. You want to share those stories. That's the sort of the visceral, personal, primary part of it, I think. But then there are rewards as well. I mean, we were talking before the show about all the conventions that there are, and I enjoy going to various conventions. I've met lots and lots of my readers at many, many conventions. I've sold thousands and thousands of books and signed thousands and thousands of books and autographs and stuff. And that's very gratifying, only not for the ego so much, although that doesn't hurt, but just for the sense that people like what you're doing, right? It's just, it's good to get feedback and know that people appreciate it. And, I mentioned Roger Zelazny. I like to tell the story that one year at DragonCon, I was doing a book signing, and a guy came up and he had a backpack, and he came up to my table and he opened up the backpack and pulled out Lucian, the book I just mentioned, and the sequel to it, Bernac. And they were both written really influenced by Roger Zelazny that we were talking about before, right? So they're my, and the book that came after them, Caroline, they're all three very much in that Amber kind of first person godly character tradition. And I tried very hard. I mean, I made no secret of it. I was like, I want to channel Roger Zelazny. I want this little series to be my Roger Zelazny series, my homage to him, my tribute to him, because I love him so much. And so this guy comes up and pulls those first two books out. And he says, a friend of mine got these books from you at DragonCon a couple of years ago. And he told me that you write just like Roger Zelazny. And I said, oh, there's no way. I don't believe it. And he said, so I ordered my own copies and I read them. And you do. I hugged that man. I hugged him tight, because that was just the ultimate compliment to me, right? That saying that you make a reader think about and feel what they felt with a writer that you admire, that shaped you growing up. To me, there's no higher compliment, right? But then beyond that, I mean, I just enjoy being able to share these stories with people. I enjoy continuing the stories. I like series a lot, and everything about it. I mean, and it doesn't hurt that it, again, it gets me into conventions and stuff. So it's like, I used to tell people when we used to stand in line at DragonCon for about 3 hours to get inside, when we were just going as attendees. And now I just kind of get to smoke right up through the line. I said the best thing I ever did was write these books, because they were worth it just to get me through the line at DragonCon. Like a free pass, So that's that alone.
Wow, my goodness. Well, congratulations on that. And to get that sort of compliment from that person who read your books, that is amazing stuff. Everything, in a way, things kind of came full circle. So congratulations on that. That's wonderful stuff.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
That is very wonderful.
Most of the stuff that I do does kind of tend to harken back, like to stuff that I love. Like the Sentinels are very much my love of the Avengers and Iron Man and everything. The Lucian series very much goes back to Zelazny. I've been working on it's like 200,000 words now. It's my Vietnam War of military sci-fi novels, I always say, but it kind of goes back to Space 1999 and the idea of the near future military stuff. And as I said, the validus-v book is about monsters and giant robots from the 70s, so I do tend to I enjoy writing in areas that evoke feelings of things I loved in the past, Oh, and then, I mean, I told you that, your interests tend to broaden out as you get older. And I've been reading tons of Donald Westlake, Richard Stark's crime novels like Parker and Dortmunder. And I've read tons of Michael Connelly's books like the Bosch books and the Lincoln Lawyer books. And so I always said I have a crime novel inside of me somewhere. I'm not sure if I can get it out. And Bobby Nash, our mutual acquaintance, Bobby Nash, good friend, he kept encouraging me, because he writes more crime type, action as opposed to science fiction, certainly. And he was always encouraging me, like, and so I did Vegas Heist and Miami Heist, over the last 3 or 4 years, because I wanted to try something different that also, again, it's in that same vein. I'm like, I read something I really enjoy and I say, can I do that? Can I do my own, unique version of that? And that's what the heist books have become.
Fascinating stuff. And we are talking with indie writer and podcaster Van Allen Plexico on this episode of And I Quote. Don't forget to like and share this with all of your closest friends. If you have any questions for him, let us know in the comments. Let us know in the chat. If this is your first time here, welcome, and we appreciate you being here. Opposite side of the fence, though, what are some of the biggest challenges about being a writer?
Yeah. Oh, there's plenty of challenges for sure. I mean, I have a family. I have a wife and daughters. You want to spend time with them, and writing is a very solitary occupation, right? You go off in a hole somewhere and you bang away on the keyboard for hours and hours, and it makes you very grouchy too, because I've always said, you know, I get completely immersed in what I'm writing. I don't like any noise. I don't like any music. I know people like to write with music. I can't stand it, because if there's music playing, I'm going to stop writing and go, oh, there's the music, and let me listen to that music. I have to just be like in an isolation box. And so when somebody comes in and talks to me, at first, I don't even know they're there, right? They're like in another universe. I don't even know they're there. And then they get your attention. And I always say it's like a brick through a plate glass window. It's physically uncomfortable me to be interrupted when I'm writing. And nobody understands that. Nobody ever gets that, right? And so, you know, you have to just kind of pick and choose your times when you can be alone and kind of be in your own world. And that's part of it. And then, of course, there's, you know, having a job and having to do all those things. So I've done a whole presentation. I did a presentation several years ago from the college where I teach. They had there was a writers conference from all over North America that was in St. Louis, the area where I teach. And they had me come in and talk about how do you find time to write? Because apparently writers that are just starting out, this is a challenge, you know, and I always say, you think that it's finding the time that's the challenge. And I get that. It can be. It certainly can be. But writing to me at least, is an activity of momentum and inertia. And I feel like if you can get the ball rolling, you'll keep it rolling, and you'll find the time to write. You will find times. If it's after everybody's gone to bed, you'll still be awake because you're excited to get this thing written. If it's early in the morning, if it's during a lunch break or something, you can find the time. To me, what's much more likely to kill writing and make you think you don't have time is that if you stop and you lose that momentum, it's like a big boulder. Once it gets rolling, it's hard to stop it. But once it stops, it's hard to get it moving again. And so I always just tell people, if you can get that boulder rolling, then the time will take care of itself. The time will present itself because you'll be sitting on go, right? Ready to do it. It's just so hard to overcome that initial inertia, though. And I understand that. I've never had writer's block per se, but I've certainly found it harder to get started on something as opposed to just smoothly sliding right into it. And one other thing I'll share that I interviewed the great Warhammer writer Graham McNeil a few years ago, good friend, and he had a really good, just practical suggestion. He says, what I do is when I plan out a scene and I start writing it, and he says, if I know I'm going to have to stop writing in a few minutes, I will stop before I finish the scene. That way, when I sit back down a day or two later or whatever, I'm in the middle of something that I know where it goes. I don't want to sit down and be at the end of something, because then I have to start something new, and that's harder. And I thought, man, that's good advice. That really is good advice.
Oh, yeah, it's like the magic words. The more you know. So there you go. Good advice. Good stuff. Really appreciate it. That is some really good advice and good stories. Yeah, for me, if I'm writing or reading, I need complete silence. I can't, no music, no people around, no other pieces of distract. And the other thing is technology, it can be very distracting. So I try to I turn everything off. Anything that would distract me, I remove from the room that I'm sitting in. For instance, I'm just giving you an example. And once I start reading, I get really immersed in the story. I'm thinking to myself, okay, I found my escape. I'm in this different world. I'm loving it. Let's eat it up. Let's soak it up. Let's soak it up like a sponge in a way. And then when I'm writing, I tried this. I had music on when I was writing this one story, and it kind of worked. And then at the end of it, I'm thinking, okay, I like the music, but I tend to get a little bit lost in the music at times. So I need to tune it out, turn it off, and just focus on the computer in front of me and just start typing away and think, okay, where's this character going to go next? What kind of trouble can I put him in? And just, eventually it comes out. I mean, it takes time, but it does come out.
Yeah. I actually wrote the Lucian book as an example, as you say. I actually wrote it when I was teaching in Atlanta, and I would teach and I would work from like 8 o'clock in the morning until 5:30, and then I had a class I would teach at a community college from like 6 to 9 or 6 to 10, and I would go to like Borders or Barnes and Noble or whatever was still open to like 11 or something, and get an hour or two of writing in before I would go home. was a long day, but I would get stuff done. And the thing I noticed was if you're at a place like that, there's noise, but it turns into such a hubbub that you don't focus on any one thing. So I don't mind like, you know, I don't mind that tumultuous cacophony or whatever word you want to use. It's if there's one person talking, that's a problem. Like if somebody was standing next to me and talking, no. But if there's like 50 people talking all at the same time, I can, you know, that just becomes a low hum. So that's not so bad. So.
Yeah, whether it's, you know, whether I'm, you know, and I've done this before with certain books that I was reading at the time. This was some years ago. I'm reading my local library, and you have that quiet room where the magazines are and people are coming in and out. That's fine. But if I hear their cell phone ringing or they start chatting up a little bit too loudly to the point where I can actually hear hear what's going on in the process, I'm thinking to myself, what are you doing in here? This is a quiet room. Get out of here. Like I'm here to read my book. I'm here to read this book, sir or ma'am. Just vacate the premises. Leave the room.
People don't get it.
You know, it's just, I don't know. It can be a bit crazy at times, depending on which library you're in. Every library is different. So please, you know, don't take what I'm saying here with a bit of a grain of salt. That being said, these words have been uttered in different pieces of media, and those magic words are Vegas, baby. Vegas. So I'm curious. Vegas heist. How did this all come about?
That photograph right there. It's so funny. It's so weird. Back in like 2017, I guess, my wife was going through a shoebox of old pictures that her uncle or second cousin or something had taken years and years ago. And she found this one picture of the Mint Hotel and Casino there in the middle of the strip, and it was dated 1965. And she showed me that picture, and I said, there's a story here, right? And I said, I've been wanting to do a crime novel, and I look at this picture and I see where I want it to happen. And I sat down and started thinking about, I needed 2 or 3 things to come together. I needed to know who was going to do it. So I needed to know who my main characters were. And I needed to know how they were going to do it, because, you know, the beginning of Ocean's 11 points out to us that nobody ever succeeds in robbing Vegas casinos, right? That it doesn't ever work. It's too hard. And I said, I need to think of a new, unique, at least to me, special. I haven't read all the literature on it, but, you know, a specifically unique way of robbing a casino. And I talked to some people and got some suggestions, and it kind of came together from there. And I came up with my 2 characters, Harper and Salsa. Harper is the very serious, grim mission planner. He's the guy that smokes his cigarettes because this is 1965, right? So everybody smokes cigarettes. That was one of the things too about it that was so much fun, was making it a period piece. I knew that I wanted it to be set in that time, because if you do a robbery story now, you have to do like Ocean's 11, where there's lasers and motion detectors and all that crap. That's fine in a movie, but I don't want to deal with all that. That crime stories like that set in the modern time inevitably become computer hacking. And that's just what you always have to have the hacker guy, right? And I'm just not interested in that. So I wanted to do a story where it's like the tough guy, the safe cracker, the mission planner, and the funny guy. So I got my 4 characters, Harper, Salsa, and the 2 that help them. Okay, they bring in. And I figured out how they're going to rob the casino. And it's like for about 2 months, I'm like, this is so different from anything. I've always written superheroes and science fiction and fantasy and portals and spaceships. How am I going to write 1965 America? And I wrestled with it, and I wrestled with it. It's so hard to change lanes. It's way harder than I ever imagined it was going to be to write something more realistic. And I had to just completely immerse my brain in 1965. I thought, all right, what I thought was, I did a lot of research, right? I did a ton of research on Las Vegas in 1965, and that helped a lot. And then I figured, well, let's start them here in St. Louis. They go down Route 66. There's stuff along the way. They get to Vegas, right? And when it hit me how to do it, that book came together in about 6 weeks. I wrote the entire thing. I mean, we went to the movies, my family, to see something, and I'm sitting there in the theater on my phone on Google Docs, writing that book off of the side with the screen dimmed because I couldn't stop. Once it started going, there's that momentum, right? Once it started going, I had to finish it, and it ended up being about 65,000. It's not a long novel, 65,000 words. I think the audiobook is about 8 hours, something like that. But it's concise, it's funny, and it's got I think a fairly clever, and it got a good review from Hard Case Crime. And it won Best Pulp Novel of the Year that year, 2019. So for 2018. So I love that book so much because it all just kind of, and it's one of those things too where I knew how the ending was going to be, whether or not they succeed, whether or not they get away with the money. And then as I'm writing that, other stuff just starts unfolding in front of me that I hadn't planned. And that's when it really gets fun, is when you're like, oh, because see, I'm a big believer in plotting and planning things out, because I want to know where I need to see the roadmap so I can lay down the seeds for things early that happen later. If you don't have any idea where it's going later, then how can you lay down seeds for things that come back? If you don't know you're going to fire the gun in Act 3, how do you know to put the gun on the wall in Act 1, right? So you need to know that something's going to happen later to prepare for it early. But what I enjoy is when other stuff around that, right? You still got that same core, but other stuff begins to form around it. And so, like, it occurred to me as they're leaving the hotel, well, there's dead bodies from something, so they're going to have to deal with that. And then I think, oh, and they left something back in the hotel room. They're going to have to go back and get that. Well, then the cops roll up, so now they got to get away from the cops. What if Salsa comes out of the hotel and Harper's gone? The car is gone. What's he going to do? Oh no! So all these complications that in the last few chapters, right? And then at the very end, you're like, well, if they get all the money, are they ever going to rob anything again? Because now they got money. So that, I'd never thought about it before, but usually in these stories, the criminals don't get away with the money because they never have any more incentive to do it. And if you think about the 3 Ocean's 11 movies, Ocean's 11 is about them getting all this money. So what happens at the very beginning of Ocean's 12 is they lose all the money, because otherwise there's no story. If they're sitting around millionaires, there's no story. So I had to learn all these tropes that I guess everybody else knew really well that I didn't fully understand about, do you get the money? Do you not? How do you deal with that? And the way that played out led me directly into Miami Heist, which exact same thing, came together in a hurry during the COVID lockdown in 2020, came together in a hurry that summer, laying out in a hammock, and also expanded out in front of me as it went. So those books were both enormously fun because they both went places that I hadn't planned while keeping the same core plot intact. So yeah, you get me talking about those 2 books, I'll go on forever. I love them.
My goodness gracious. I mentioned 3 little words: Vegas, baby, Vegas. And all of a sudden he just goes on this incredible behind the scenes of how this all came together. And that is great stuff. And congratulations on that. That is truly amazing, because when I saw that picture, and I'm thinking, because there was a TV series that was on CBS. It only lasted 1 season. Go figure, because every TV show nowadays lasts 2 minutes. It was simply called Vegas. And it was set during that time period. And it starred Michael Chiklis and Dennis Quaid. Dennis Quaid was the new sheriff in town, running, keeping people safe in Vegas, and Michael Chiklis was the crime boss, doing underhanded things, doing not so working for the mob or the mafia, whatever it was. So when I see this image on screen of Vegas Heist, particularly, I'm thinking to myself, that reminds me of the TV series I watched some years back called Vegas. That's intriguing. So, me personally, I've never been to Las Vegas, Nevada, but when I see the television series, whether it's Vegas, that was actually set, I believe, in the 50s or 60s, and then there was the TV series that came out before that called Las Vegas with James Caan, Josh Duhamel, and all those other. Granted, that's set in modern day, but at the same time, it's Vegas, baby. It's Vegas. Yeah. Just get vibes off of that. It's good stuff. And you know what? You know what else is good stuff is this very episode that you're listening or watching of right now, which is, and I quote, with indie writer and podcaster Van Allen Plexico. If you have any questions for him, let us know in the comments. Let us know in the chat, and don't forget to like and share this with all of your closest friends. Were you gonna state something there, Van?
No.
I thought you were gonna say something there for a second. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So I mentioned Vegas, baby, Vegas. Now we're gonna take a trip to another time period. Gideon Kane is known as the Demon Hunter. How did this all come about?
Oh yeah, so this goes back to the Avengers, believe it or not. Okay, so way back in 1995, when the internet first kind of came along, my roommate in college was worked in the computer lab and learned how to make web pages. And so he showed me how, and I made an Avengers site, which is still up to date. It's been up for like 28 years now, called AvengersAssemble.net. And it attracted a bunch of Avengers fans to me that wanted to talk about Avengers. So we created a mailing list. So years go by that we have this Avengers discussion mailing list. And eventually Kurt Busiek, that wrote the Avengers and Conan and Marvels and other Marvel stuff and all, Kurt joined us and was a lot of fun to talk to. And one day we were all talking, and I said something like, I've been reading the Solomon Kane stories of Robert E. Howard. I said, the thing about him is the Solomon Kane stories are great, but they never really give his origin. They don't give anything about his family. They don't really tell where he's going. It's like he's dropped into an adventure. He has this adventure and it's over. Like there's like a dozen stories, and he fights, monsters and demons and skeletons and stuff, but he doesn't really have like a single adversary. He doesn't really have a backstory. He's just this guy. He's interesting. I said, wouldn't it be cool if Robert E. Howard had given us like a whole novel about Solomon Kane where we understood a lot more about him? And somebody's like, we could do that. And I said, well, let's come up with a character kind of like him that's similar. He's a Puritan swordsman with the flintlock pistols, and he fights supernatural enemies. But let's go ahead and like flesh out his entire life, his backstory, his purpose, everything. And so a number of people in our Avengers mailing list started throwing out ideas, and I was just taking notes, right? And it was like it's a group exercise. And once we had the whole story Bible put together, then I said, well, who wants to write some stories about him? And I wrote one, and several other people wrote them. And we took it to Airship 27, and they published it, and it did okay. This was about like 2010, 2011, at the same time, about 2010, something like that. And it did okay, and it was kind of forgotten. It kind of came and went. It was kind of forgotten. And so a couple of years ago, I thought, it's too bad that we never did anything more with that property, because I thought it was really good and there were some good stories. And in the meantime, I'd hooked up with Jeffrey Hayes, this brilliant cover artist. He did the validus-v cover. He did that Gideon Kane cover that you just showed. Is that okay? And I went to Jeff.
This is the Captain Hawkland shirt, but yes.
Oh yeah, there you go. And so I went to Jeff and I said, what do you think about like a Solomon Kane type character? And Jeff was like, oh yeah, that would be great. So he did that painting. And I said, all right, we're going to take all the old stories and I'm going to go out and solicit new ones. And then I'm going to write a story that finishes the whole thing off. And so we put it all together with this new cover. In the meantime, by the way, Airship had done a comic book, like an all-star comics short stories collection, like a big thick comic of like 8-10 page stories. And so I got the rights back from them to my Gideon Kane story that I had done with Rob Davis drawing it. So we put that in there too. And we did it as a Kickstarter last summer, and it did great because the hardcover of that book is. I went to Lulu that print stuff, and I said, I want your blackest ink, your glossiest heavy paper, your nicest hardcover with a wraparound dust jacket. And they just delivered this beautiful. It's heavy, it's thick, glossy. I mean, that thing is gorgeous, and it's expensive. It's like $35 or whatever, but it's it's fully illustrated by Rob Davis. It's got that gorgeous cover, and it's got like 12 or 15 stories, some of them older, some new. And then I did like this double length story that wraps up his adventure, where he's pursuing the demon Azazel. I guess that's how you pronounce it. I don't know. I never asked him how he pronounces his name, but he's pursuing this demon through like 1700s America and then around the world. And so it's kind of like this cat and mouse game where every story is he arrives in some new place, and either the demon is there or has been there, corrupting people, controlling people, and he has to battle his way through whatever menaces as he continues this seemingly never-ending quest. And then I wrote an extra link story at the end that brings the quest to what I think is a satisfactory conclusion. So yeah, I love that one.
That's incredible stuff. I should know I contributed to that Kickstarter. I have the hardcover here on my bookshelf.
Oh yeah, isn't it nice?
It's ridiculously good looking, and Jeffrey Hayes never disappoints and he never fails.
Yeah.
So He never does. By the way, I do want to take a moment here and acknowledge our good friend, hey, Carl, good to see you. Carl Witzman is here with us. He says, I got here late. He has a question for you, Van Allen Plexico. Do you write in other genres too?
All right. So I started out writing sort of like Roger Zelazny Fantasy with Lucian, and I've got several books in that series. It ties into a space opera series called The Shattering, which has got 3 Legion novels and some other stuff. There's even a comic book that we did of one of the stories from it. So there's sort of like, it's kind of that British Gothic space opera where there's demons and monsters and gods and stuff, in addition to guys in armor and tanks and spaceships and all. So that's called The Shattering, Legion 1, Legion 2, Legion 3. I did the Sentinels superhero novels, 9 of those. They're just pure straight ahead, like Marvel, DC superhero adventures as prose. Cause I said, Bobby and I can't draw. So we just wrote them as novels. And that was kind of a new thing when we started doing that back in the 90s. And when the first one came out as a novel in 2006, 7, 8, somewhere in there, there weren't a lot of other original superhero novels out there. There's a lot more now, but back then there really weren't that many, about 20 years ago. So, and then of course the crime stuff set in the 60s. I got a review for Miami Heist, the second one. I think it was Michael Gordon who said, he said, I don't know if there's anybody else out there writing 1960s crime novels, but I can't imagine they're doing it as well as Van. I'm like, I'll take it. That sounds good to me. I memorized that review because that's such a great, I really appreciate him saying that, but it's true. I don't know how many other people are writing books set in 1965 where you rob things, but you know, so, is that everything? Well, there's the giant robot, giant monster Japanese thing that's set in 1978. Because again, I don't want the modern computer hacking stuff. I want it to be, in the 70s, a giant robot and a giant monster was a big thing, right? Literally, there was no, we didn't go to the movie theater and see, other than Godzilla, and see that. And so I wanted the kids' point of view to be very, innocent and naive and not like, oh, look, it's a giant monster, like in Gundam, like in Shogun Warriors, like, all this stuff. So, I don't know. I guess that's, if I think of something else, I'll mention it, but I don't, I guess that's all I've done so far. Oh, and near future military sci-fi. I've got the original version of Alpha Omega came out several years ago from Pro Se Press. And it's kind of my Space 1999 type story set on Alpha Centauri. It's the United States and the Russians, and I'm reworking it now. I got the rights back to it, and I'm reworking it into like basically the noble house of, of military science fiction. So, yeah, I guess that's it. I mean, I guess that's all the different genres I've done so far. But I'm always looking for something new. So.
Oh, rock on. It's like Baskin Robbins. You got 31 flavors of everything. And then Carl Witzman goes on to say, another Lulu author. Yay.
Yeah, Lulu is great for doing stuff like hardcovers. I don't go to them for anything else, but Lulu does really nice hardcovers. I know that like Amazon, and which used to be CreateSpace, and others, they'll do paperbacks better and cheaper and all that. But Lulu's hardcovers are really, really nice. And that's kind of who I go to for those. They're a little more expensive than other places, but as you could testify, Ryan, from the Gideon Kane book, you get your money's worth from those.
It's ridiculously good looking, I think, is one way to describe it. And once again, we are talking with Van Allen Plexico on this episode of Van Dyke Quote. Don't forget to like and share this with all of your closest friends. If you have any questions for Van, please let us know in the comments. Let us know in the chat. If this is your first time here, welcome, and we're glad that you are indeed with us. Another image, and for those of you who may be listening, I'm going to bring up another image here and allow you to share. validus-v, how did this all come about?
Yeah, everybody calls it validus-v, and I should have known that was going to happen, but it's validus-v.
validus-v, sorry.
Just to have that alliteration at the beginning.
My bad.
No. Everybody says it. When they said I won the award, they said validus-v, and I'm like, that's not the name of the book, but okay. It's that. Yeah, that came about because, like I said, I love Godzilla comics. I love the Shogun Warriors. I had the toys, and it's funny. A couple of years ago, I discovered the Gundam model kits, those snap together, no glue model kits of the different robots and all. And I know nothing about the show or the books or anything, but it was fun to make the little robots. And I kept thinking I should write a story or a book or something that kind of is evocative of this. And I went and I have all the Shogun Warriors and all the Godzilla comics. I went back and reread both series. And it's funny because while the Shogun Warriors was always my favorite of the two when I was younger, when I was a kid, they don't hold up as well, I don't think. But the Godzilla comics are brilliant that Doug Moench and Herb Trimpe did. They're really, really good because they're basically a Shield series. Godzilla is like their enemy. He's just their enemy every month, every issue. But it's really about Dum Dum Dugan and his men on the Shield helicarrier chasing this big lizard around. And, he goes into a new town and tears stuff up. And here comes the helicarrier. And Dum Dum's like, all right, man, let's get that big lizard, and they kind of scrap and whatever. And then somehow Doug Moench was able to make like 24, I guess, issues out of that, which was impressive, right? After like 4 issues, I'd have been out of ideas, honestly. And so I thought, all right, let's combine them. Let's have the big robots and let's have the big monsters. And I just started fiddling around with like, my own version of that. How could I, give a backstory and a history and the characters, the people, the human beings, and because that's what's really going to matter is the human beings. And it was just one of those things where I just kept working on it. It didn't come together easy, but I kept going back to the outline and thinking, oh, what if this, what if that? And eventually I got to know the teenager, the main kid, the Hawaii. It's Hawaii. It's got to be in the Pacific, right? It's got to be in the Pacific Ocean. So he's a Japanese American kid, about 15, in Hawaii, and his older brother he thinks is in the Air Force. And then at the beginning of the story, he finds out his older brother is not in the Air Force. He actually flies a giant alien robot. And his brother picks him up and says, let me fly you around in this robot. This is really cool. And then something happens to injure the older brother. And so the kid has to take over, right? You got to contrive to put the kid in charge of the robot. And so this teenage kid is flying this giant robot, and everybody's against him because the monsters come out of the ocean. The other giant robots come after him, being like mind controlled. And let me tell you one other thing about that book. I told you that research was huge in Vegas Heist and Miami Heist. Doing that research in the 1960s in Vegas and Miami was huge. God, I came up with so much material for Miami Heist, I couldn't use a third of it. Like 1960, every heist book's going to be a different the next year. 1966 Miami, the Miami Dolphins are first beginning, and there's a hurricane. And I had to work both of those into the story. So at one point, you meet some Miami Dolphins players, and at one point, there's a hurricane, and it becomes like Hurricane Heist, basically. But anyway, so I was doing research for like around Hawaii and those little islands. And let me just tell you, if you go on Wikipedia and go on Google and you go down the research wormhole of Johnston Atoll, Johnston Atoll is a tiny little island, part man-made, part natural. It's just south of Hawaii. It's got nuclear waste. It's got chemical weapons from Vietnam. It's got crazy ants that have infested it. And it's got like a scientific research base. And I'm just like, this came straight out of Marvel Comics, right?
My goodness gracious. Yeah, it did. Yeah, that's a plethora of problems on one piece of land, I might say. And Carl Witzman chimes in. He says, oh, yeah, that research is important because at least one reader will catch you. If you make a mistake, haha.
Yeah, no, that's true. I do worry about that. But I think even more it's important for germinating ideas, right? I mean, like, I didn't know exactly how the robbery was going to go in the Miami Heist book. And then when I found out there was a hurricane, I'm like, well, that solves all my problems, right? Because if it's a sunny sky or a clear night, the cops are everywhere. They're in boats, they're in cars, on the bridges, right? It's a nightmare. But if there's a hurricane, you can get away, right? Because everybody's scrambling, there's storms, there's disaster. My guys, they're not bad guys. They're the heisters, right? They can just cruise right out of town in like an army truck that's supposed to be bringing supplies or water bottles or something, right? They just right. So the hurricane just made everything easier, more logical, and it just let me connect all the dots just right. So doing that research, and then, like I said, researching Johnston Atoll, I'm like, this is Monster Island from Marvel, right? So now I know where the monsters live, right? The monsters like to come to Johnston Atoll just to kind of soak up the radiation and the chemical weapons, because that's like candy to them, right? Because they're evil monsters. So, well, one of them's not evil, one of them's nice, but anyway, so yeah, once I had that island, I knew, oh, I've got my setting right now. I've got my characters, I got my setting. It all's coming together. So, yeah, I'm learning the joy of research and how you still have to use your imagination, but it gives you such a good starting point for those things.
Absolutely, absolutely true, absolutely true. Carl Witzman goes on to say, "Love it when a plot comes together."
That's exactly. Oh, I do a little plot dance around the table when when things like that happen. I'm like, oh, and it always does, right? I mean, it's funny, when I was first starting out as a writer, I would really worry that I wouldn't be able to think of ideas, I wouldn't be able to put things together, but you know, it always seems to work. And so I've quit. It's funny. You can be a better writer, a more imaginative writer, when you're fearless. And when I quit worrying and just said, it'll come to me, right? Just pursue it. It'll come. And something always does. So that's another little writer's advice is, don't spend too much time worrying about your plot and should I go here? Should I do this? Just do it and it'll come to you. It always comes to you. And if you know the characters, they will stand up in the middle of the story and say, hey, we need to do this. Because if they've become real people, right, and you want your characters to become three-dimensional real people, if they have, they will tell you what they want to do.
That is very true. That is very true. And once again, we are here with the incredible Van Allen Plexico on this episode of Van Dyke Quote. Don't forget to like and share this with all of your closest friends. If you have any questions for him, let us know in the comments. Let us know in the chat. Be more than happy to hear from you. Another image here I'd like to bring up here for just a moment, because this cover intrigued me. Caroline, beautiful looking woman holding a sword, and apparently I believe that's a snowflake standing behind her, and she's got a heart that's just so cold. It's cold as ice. So how did this come about?
So I had done Lucian, who is like basically, now I would point out, I wrote Lucian in 2002, 2003, 2004, way before Marvel Cinematic Universe's Loki ever existed. But I always describe my Lucian character as basically Marvel's movie Loki, not the old comics Loki, but movie Loki. He's similar to that. And then people buy it. It's amazing how people buy it as soon as I say that. But it's been around for a while. So then I did Baranak, who was like the warrior god, as the second book. And in both of those books, Caroline pops up. And also in the Legion, in the space opera books, the Legion trilogy, she pops up because it's that British Gothic sci-fi, military sci-fi, where it crosses over with dark fantasy elements. The American military sci-fi is like very clean. It's like American military sci-fi wants to refight the Vietnam War. British military sci-fi wants to fight Warhammer. You know what I mean? Warhammer 40K with gods and demons and stuff. And I love that. It's got a lot more flavor. So all right. So Caroline kept popping up as like this really tough, hard-nosed goddess that is just, she takes no prisoners. She has no patience for people. And she's got a cosmic powered axe and a sword. And, I wanted to do a book with her, but I didn't know what the plot was. This is a case where I knew the characters and the setting, but not the plot. I didn't know what was happening. And this is so funny. So my family and I were at Universal Studios in Orlando one summer. And we went into the Harry Potter wand store. And my daughters are all just like, oh, I want this one, I want this one. They're, so they're, my wife is over with them looking at shopping basically. And I'm just reading the wands, reading these things. And it's like, they say, it has like a piece of unicorn horn in it, or it has each wand has like something to do with it that powers it, some unique thing. And I thought, what if Caroline's axe has some like the heart of a black hole or a piece of a neutron star or something like that? And then I thought, what if there's like 7 cosmic weapons of the gods and each one is powered by something different? and makes them, godly level weapons that only the gods can wield, right? Because these Caroline, Lucian, Baranak are all think like Jack Kirby gods, like Thor and Hercules, that kind of cosmic space gods, okay, that would fight the Celestials or something. So I thought they've got these weapons, and I thought the bad guy is collecting them, and he comes after Caroline to get her axe. And so Caroline, that book opens with her getting her axe stolen. And over the course of that book, she puts together like a whole fellowship of other bizarre characters working with her, traveling all over the multiverse to get back her axe and to also get these other weapons that are being stolen. So it's kind of a heist book in a way. And it's interesting because along the way, one of the characters that joins her little party is kind of my god of time and space. He travels through space and time in different conveyances in different books. And so in this one, I gave him like a glass elevator that glows orange when he's traveling. And I'm like, well, he's Doctor Who. So basically it becomes a Doctor Who novel with it's like a mean Wonder Woman and Doctor Who, and then these other odd characters all together on this quest. And so they go all over the place, and they have a really good time. And so that's where that one came from. And I'm trying to think who did that cover. David Williams. Yeah, I believe that's the David Williams painting. So
one does not simply travel the multiverse. I mean, honestly, they don't. And Carl Witzman says, I got to head out of here, but keep writing fearlessly. Carl
exactly.
Witzman.
Yes. Thank you, Carl. That's right. That's exactly what you got to do.
Got to keep writing fearlessly. Any other special memories for you from being at conventions, whether you were there as a vendor or there as an attendee?
Oh, we could go for another 2 hours on that. I mean, what have I not seen at conventions? Like, all right, real quick, here's just like a greatest hits. I went to a panel where Peter David and Harlan Ellison were supposed to talk about writing for TV.
Yes.
But when we all got in there, including them, they saw there was a piano in the room. They spent the entire hour playing and singing show tunes.
Oh my goodness.
Not what we went in for, but how many people can say they've been entertained by Peter David and Harlan Ellison doing show tunes? That was, somebody behind me said, well, I wanted to hear about the writing for TV. I'm like, you can hear from that anytime. This was special, right? This was special. Yeah. I don't even know where to go from there, but I don't know. I mean, it's just been, conventions to me are just so wonderful because you get to meet so many different people. You get to see so many different things. You get to have so much fun and get so much feedback. I always say, like I said, writing is a very solitary, boring profession. Anything that lets you go out and meet your audience. I've never said I have fans. I have readers, people that enjoy reading my stuff. And I like to get feedback from them. I like to hear back from them. And it's very gratifying. And I've got 20 novels out now. And we didn't mention this. I've got quite a few nonfiction books because I'm a college professor. I enjoy doing history type things. I've done 2 volumes on the Avengers, history of the Avengers. I've done 3 volumes on Auburn sports, my alma mater, football and basketball, and a comics trivia book from the first 10 years we did Marvel DC trivia at DragonCon, and I'm working on more. I'm actually starting now. You might find this interesting. I'm actually starting now writing a nonfiction book that's kind of autobiographical. It's going to be called A Dozen Marvels. I'm going to look back at 12 Marvel comics that impacted my life at different points between when I was a kid and now. And I'm going to talk about the comic, and I'm going to talk about what it meant to me and how it affected me. And maybe nobody will care, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes. My
goodness gracious, that sounds both amazing and incredible.
Yeah, I see what you did there. I see there.
If I do say so myself. With that being said, what other pieces of advice would you give to aspiring writers out there?
Well, we covered a lot. I think that I'm different than a lot of writers. I don't like not big on like writers groups. I think it's a solitary activity, and I don't want to spend my time reading other people's works in progress. I just don't have time in my life. I told you it's hard enough to find time to do your own thing. I appreciate it. I do edit, other people's stuff when I put together like the Gideon Kane book. So I read other people's stuff, but it's stuff that I've solicited. I would say read everything and read in other genres than the ones you're comfortable in. Like the things that influence me are never in the same genre. When I wrote validus-v, I wasn't at that time reading Godzilla comics. I was reading Stephen King because I wanted to make this kid interesting. And there's nobody that can make us care about human being characters more than Stephen King. It's what he does. I always say Stephen King will write a 1,000-page novel, and the first 800 pages are just, why should I care? And then the last 200 pages are, and then the monster shows up, right? And I care, right? So learning to make your characters believable and why we should care about them is an important thing, I think. And like I say, read lots of genres because you're going to get ideas and styles and approaches from all over the place, not just from one genre, one thing. That's, I think, is the main thing I would say. Read a lot.
There you go. Mic drop. Well, once again, we are talking with the mighty Van Allen Plexico on this episode of Van Dyke Quote. Don't forget to like and share this with all of your closest friends. If you have any questions for Van, please let us know in the comments. Let us know in the chat. If this is your first time here, welcome, and we're glad that you're with us. Now, I understand that you run a number of podcasts, so my question for that is, one of them is concerning a certain secret agent that worked for MI6, also known as the British Secret Service. So what's your favorite Bond film and Bond actor that's not Sean Connery?
Yeah, I have a podcast network, which takes up way too much time. That's time I could be writing. And our podcast is on Her Majesty's Secret Podcast. It's funny, I wasn't planning to do a James Bond podcast, but when I came up with that title, I said, well, now we got to do it because I love that title, on Her Majesty's Secret Podcast. With Alan J. Porter and Jared Albrick and others. I think that probably my favorite, I'll say, this is the way I always answer that question. The greatest Bond is Sean Connery. But my favorite Bond is Pierce Brosnan because he combines so much of what's good about the others. And I just love him to death. And I was so excited when he got the job. I wanted him to get the job when Roger Moore quit, but he was under contract to NBC, obviously, and he couldn't get away from Remington Steele.
That's right.
But when he finally did get to take over in '95 with GoldenEye, I know that people hate his last movie, and I understand that, but it's got Sean Connery in it, so I love it. I mean Pierce Brosnan in it, so I love it. It's got all four of his I love. And he's just a likable Bond. I mean, he doesn't have the annoying qualities that Roger Moore occasionally can have. He's not dour and serious all the time, like
Timothy Dalton was.
Timothy Dalton. I'm blanking out. Sorry. He's kind of got a little Roger Moore. He's got a little Sean Connery. And so I love him. He's fun. Daniel Craig, they're entertaining movies, but he's not fun, So I go with Pierce. What about you?
No, for me, growing up watching Bond movies, my dad was a fan, and he introduced me to a lot of different movies and a lot of different characters. So, Dad, I love you. I miss you. Thank you for introducing me to these characters. James Bond, his favorite movie for him was Goldfinger. And I watched bits and pieces of it on VHS because, yes, we had a thing called VHS tapes back in the day. And I still have some, by the way, that still work properly. So I watched a bit of Goldfinger, and I'm thinking, this isn't my thing. This isn't my thing. And then a little year called 1995 rolled around, and he said, hey, there's this new Bond movie that's out. Let's go and see it. I said, what are you talking about? It's the new Bond film. What's GoldenEye? I'm like, all right, fine, I'll go. And we went, and my jaw was on the floor. My eyes were bulging out of their sockets, and my mind was blown after 2.5 hours of watching that great film, which I still think is a great film to this day.
Oh, yeah.
So after GoldenEye, I looked at my dad, and I said, if this is what movies can be, I want more of this. Like, give me all of it. Like, I want to see more action, because I watched action movies here and there, but when I saw that movie in particular, and by the way, everyone's story is different, I realized, okay, action adventure is a genre I can really get myself into as a viewer. Maybe not I'm not saying I'm going to be a writer or anything, but I'm like, as a viewer, I can enjoy this. So we went to town. We saw all the Brosnan films, and unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to go and see the first Daniel Craig movie because he had passed away the year prior to that. So But GoldenEye was the first Bond film I ever saw in theaters, and from then on, I thought, yeah, Pierce is a boss, and I want to see him in everything. So,
Right.
GoldenEye is my favorite. It still is. It will always be my favorite to this day. I have it. I mean, I bought it on VHS when the James Bond 007 collection was a thing, like way back when. I have that. I had the DVD when the 007 was transferred over to DVD, and then after the DVD came out and the Blu-ray started, like I basically just upgraded the gosh darn thing, every couple of years. I would go to the, you know what I mean? Like I would go to the store and just upgrade my DVD to a Blu-ray and yada yada yada.
Absolutely.
And then the beautiful thing about studios or about the motion pictures is that each era of James Bond, they came out with the Daniel Craig collection, the Pierce Brosnan collection, the Timothy Dalton, all that stuff. I just went ahead and bought the collections of different actors because I'm thinking to myself, okay, I like his era, but I don't like his. I like this one and I don't. So then you can pick and choose. It's a wonderful thing.
Sure.
So, yeah, I love GoldenEye. Always have, always will. Perfect cast, perfect story, perfect action, good quips. Funny names for the characters. And also, he's no longer with us, but Robbie Coltrane as Valentin Zukovsky.
Yes.
When he drops in, and this comes in, by the way, for just a little behind the scenes story here, halfway through the movie when he comes in, he steals the show. I mean, he grabs Bond, he puts him in the chair, he says, what do you think my knee aches every single day, twice as bad when it's cold. You have any idea how long the winter lasts in this country? I'm just laughing hysterically, and I'm thinking, this is great. Like, the mission is like the MacGuffin of the story, right? But when he comes in and just kind of steals the show for about 5 or 7 minutes, however long he's on set, I could watch them just bicker with each other all day.
Oh yeah,
I think
Absolutely.
It's funny. Personally,
yeah. And my favorite Bond girl is Wei Lin, the great Michelle Yeoh in the second.
Oh
movie.
yes, that movie just turned 25 last year. Tomorrow Never Dies.
That's right, Oscar winning Wei Lin.
It's amazing. Amazing stuff, 100%. But yes, you run a different series, I should say, of different podcasts, and one of the ones that stood out for me, one of those that stood out to me was obviously James Bond. So
yeah, it does very well. It's that popular. We have that one. We have a Babylon 5 show. We have a football show that really kind of pays the bills because that's where the fans have a lot of fans, and then the White Rocket show basically is just our general conversation show, kind of like this, where we just talk to people and have different topics and all.
Oh. Well, that's fair. And as far as the Auburn thing, don't let my friends who are Roll Tide fans hear that. But that's neither here nor there. Sorry, I just had to bring that up. I know, but I do have friends who are Roll Tide fans. But not that it matters, because me personally, I don't watch sports. That's why I prefer to read books. So, whether it's reading books or watching movies, Van, that's what I enjoy doing, not so much the sports thing. But if that's your thing, hey, by all means, you do you.
I like it all. I love it all.
Which is fair. I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad thing, but what the good thing is that this episode of Van Dyke Quote, and every episode, I should say, Van Dyke Quote is indeed powered by our good friends over there at Poddex. Now, Poddex are the hottest new tool for podcasters looking to have more meaningful conversations or gamify their podcast. You simply shuffle up, ask a question, and you let the content roll. Get yours today at poddex.com and use that promo code Ryan10. That's RYAN10, Ryan10, for 10% off your order. You're not going to want to miss out on that one. With that being said, Poddex wants to know, what is something that people are obsessed with, but you just don't get the point of?
Well, I would say
maybe? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. I would say any reality TV, but I don't really watch much network TV anyway. I only watch things like the Disney shows, the Marvel shows, and the Star Wars and and Foundation and things like that. I have no interest in. I was, put it this way, when I was a little kid in rural Alabama with 3 TV channels, and one of them was PBS. I had to watch enough network bad television to last a lifetime. And so I feel like I've done my time on, those shows, the shows with commercials. And for the rest of my days, hopefully I'll only be watching streaming type shows with no commercials, that are fun things, that are really well done, that are premium products, so that would be for sure.
There you go. And what would you do if you pulled a Claude Rains and you were invisible for a day?
That's hard because there's like the answer you'd give in public, and then there's what you might actually do. You know, you wouldn't want to tell anybody. The whole point of being invisible would be to do things that people don't know you're doing. So if you give it away, what was the point? What was the point, right? But I don't know. And it's funny because at different times in your life, there's way different answers to that, right? Like if you're in high school, you'd be like, I'd run in the girls' locker room or something, you know, whereas, you know, I'm not gonna say that now or anything, but that's a really good question. I have no idea. I'd probably sit around. You know what I would do? It's kind of like trying to figure out what to watch on TV late at night on the Apple TV. You end up spending the whole time sitting there thinking what you're going to do, and you never actually do it. I'd be like, you have 1 minute of invisibility left. I'm like, dang it, I hadn't figured out what to do yet.
Yeah, I'm with you on that because I remember back when this little store called Blockbuster Video was tearing up the competition, and you were walking up and down those aisles. It would take me hours to figure out what I was going to pick out that night. And nowadays, when you have streaming services, which for those of you who have the access to these streaming services, you understand, I'm flipping through at 11:30, 12 o'clock at night. It's 12 in the morning, and I can't make up my flipping mind. And then I look at the clock, and it's 12:30 in the morning, and I'm thinking, I got to get up tomorrow to do stuff. I need to get some rest, right? So I just take the remote, I exit out of the streaming service, respectively, and hit the power button, turn the TV off, and then just go into my room, and I go to sleep, right? Because that's what you just do.
That's exactly. No, I know. It's funny. I found myself actually on YouTube more than I ever dreamed I would. Like I'm a teenager or something. Because at least when you go on YouTube, you can do the little quick hits, right? Like I got 10 minutes. I can watch something interesting. I can learn something. I can laugh at something. Whereas if I try to watch a 2-hour movie right now, I'm going to make it 10 minutes in, I'm going to fall asleep, or I got to go to bed, or I got to go to work or something. So I've found that I've watched way more YouTube than I ever dreamed I would. It's amazing.
Yeah, and here's the shocking thing about YouTube. Maybe you've noticed this too. Do you realize there's a lot of movies on there now that you can stream for free with ads? And I'm noticing this more and more as I go throughout the course of my YouTube, just looking through it. Because if I click on one movie, you're going to get suggested like 10 more because YouTube watches you, what you're doing. So they throw 3 other movies that you may like. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, I was watching Quick Change with Bill Murray, and now you're telling me that Searching for Bobby Fischer is on here? Are you kidding me? Searching for Bobby Fischer is one of the most underrated movies of all time. And by the way, Searching for Bobby Fischer turns 30 this year. Fun fact. Came out in 1993. Great year for filmmaking, by the way. So that I discovered that Quick Change was on there. You know, this B movie sci-fi movie called The Core with Aaron Eckhart and Hilary Swank from 2003 is on there. Which, by the way, I like The Core. I know the science is not correct in any way, shape, or form, but it feels real to me when I'm watching the movie. Like I can believe what they're saying, even though I know it's fake. It's not real because people actually wrote in the comment section, not of this particular movie that was recently posted on YouTube for free, but people go back and watch the trailers for certain movies, and they look at the comment section. And I'm reading these. People are saying this movie is horrible. This is one of the worst movies ever made because the science is so wrong. And I'm thinking to myself, it's a movie.
Exactly.
It can't be real 100% of the time. If it's real, we have real life for that. Like
exactly, very good point. That's a good way of putting it, Ryan. I like that. Yeah,
people
have real life for that.
People complain about this movie, and I'm thinking, first of all, it's got a great cast. Second of all, it's directed by the same person who directed Entrapment with Sean Connery and Catherine Zeta-Jones.
Okay, yeah,
which is a heist movie. Speaking of Entrapment, that's a heist thing right there. And Sean Connery did it. And that's another film that gets man, that movie got not so good reviews on Rotten. Like now, when I've discovered these things, Rotten Tomatoes, the numbers are bad for that movie, and then people write how bad it is, and I'm thinking, what movie were you watching? Entrapment is freaking awesome. It's got Sean Connery when he's close to retirement, and then you got Catherine Zeta-Jones who's in her prime.
Yeah,
how can you say no to that?
Yeah, I don't know. I disagree with most movie reviews anyway, but I think a lot of people do. So I think the people that go give movie reviews seem to be different from everybody else that watches movies. I was going to say, though, the funny thing, I feel like I've seen every old movie I ever want to see. I'm pretty caught up on movies. I've watched a lot of movies in my life. So now I'm basically just looking for new things that are coming along. And so I've ended up, we're in the golden age right now, kind of the tail end maybe of the golden age of television. And so that's where all the money's going. That's where all the actors are going. That's where all the production's going. So I've got like every streaming service because that's where everything is. I go to the theater. I would love to go to the theater every 2 weeks But the things I want to see these days are on television. They're not at the movie theater. It's just how it is.
Well, that's a fair deal. That's a fair deal. And what also is a fair deal is that we have this incredible episode of And I Quote featuring Van Allen Plexico, indie writer and podcaster. And don't forget to like and share this with all of your friends. If you have any questions for Van, please let us know in the comments. Let us know in the chat. If this is your first time here, welcome. Please enjoy your stay. Poddex wants to know, if you could jump into a pool that is full of something, what would it be?
A pool full of something.
Could be anything.
Oh, man, these questions are hard.
We spare no expense.
Yeah. How about Zaxby's or Guthrie sauce?
Okay.
I would never want it again, probably, but I do love it. So how about a giant pool of nachos? I could eat my way out. That's my favorite thing.
That's fair. Nachos aren't so bad at all. So there you go. Well, there's that. There's this. Exactly. Play a little bit of Pac-Man. No.
Yeah, I eat my way out like Pac-Man. That'd be it.
Pac-Man or some of those other games that came out during that time period. I don't know. It could be anything. I'll leave it at that. But let me rephrase. What would be the worst ingredients to fill a burrito with?
Well, does it have to be food related? Because I mean, you could put anything poisonous in there, and you wouldn't want anything to do with it. But I'm going to say, if it's food related and you got to put in there, I'm going to have to go with like asparagus. I don't want any part of that.
There you go. I'm not so much a fan of that either, by the way. So for that part, you and I are in good company. So
Yeah, I think so, probably.
But would you rather give up all drinks except for water, or give up eating anything that was cooked in an oven?
Well, I've pretty much given up drinking most drinks that aren't water. My thing I'm drinking right here is basically water. It's just fizzy filter water. I would miss the occasional beer or glass of milk, but I haven't had a soft drink in 12 years now, something like that. I just I gave them up and never looked back. So yeah, I think I'll keep the casseroles and the cakes and stuff and give up the other drinks. Yeah, I tell you, that was a good move too, because I realized that soft drinks have gotten so bad nowadays, between corn syrup and everything that goes in them that's bad for you. The human body is not meant to process that stuff. And then the caffeine was keeping me awake at night and stuff. And so when I got rid of soft drinks, it's funny, like 2 years ago, I was stuck somewhere all day and had nothing else to drink. And I went to a Coke machine and I got a Dr. Pepper out. I hadn't had Dr. Pepper at that point in like 8-9 years. And I took 2 sips and had to throw it away. And I used to love Dr. Pepper. And if you go that long without drinking it, it was like drinking espresso or paint or something, I just, so.
Or you could say, in other words, it was like drinking motor oil.
Yeah. It's once you give something up for a while, your body chemistry changes somehow, or your taste buds or something, and I just couldn't do it. So
it's different. Unlike our good friend Forrest Gump. Number 2, that it was free. I must have drank myself about 15 Dr. Peppers.
Yeah, there was a time that I would have done that, but not anymore. Not anymore.
Oh, you gotta love it. Poddex has some great questions, and we got some great pop culture references thrown into the mix for good measure. So it's a win-win for everybody. But you know what else is a win? This. So I want to take this opportunity to say thank you to Van Allen Plexico for being our guest on this very, very Marvel giant episode. Hashtag not a sponsor. I just want to point that out, Marvel. A giant episode of And I Quote. Van, thank you so much for being here. Where can the person who is watching or listening to this follow you on social media and everything that you have coming up? What do you got?
Oh, Ryan, it's been a blast. It's really fun to talk to you. And I hope that folks out there got some entertainment or anything out of it. You can find me www.plexico.net, plexico.net. My Avengers site is avengersassemble.net. White Rocket Books and Podcasts are at whiterocketbooks.com. And otherwise, I'm on Facebook, but it's usually easier to get me on Twitter at Van Allen Plexico. One long word, at Van Allen Plexico.
Rock on. Well, thank you very much for being here, kind sir. Do greatly appreciate it. My name is Ryan of Nerd Culture. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at RyanRPM5. Don't forget to check out all the links to where you can follow us on social media and where you can follow Van Allen Plexico are located within the description of this episode. So make sure you check that out. Check out all the wonderful things he's got going on. Also, we are this close to hitting 1,000 subscribers. Once we do, we're going to throw a great big live stream with returning guests, surprise guests, and some great giveaways for you, our incredible subscribers. We cannot do this without you. We appreciate you being here. Also, our next movie anniversary watch along coming up on May the 25th, a little indie film called Return of the Jedi. Turns the big 4-0, Van. That's right. The big 4-0 on May 25th, 8 p.m. Eastern time. We're going to be watching the movie. We're going to have special guests, and we're going to have some fun watching the OG version. That's right. The OG version of Return of the Jedi. No special editions, no Disney Plus cuts on this stream. We're kicking it old school, ladies and gentlemen. That's right. And by the way, old school, it's just a number. Age doesn't matter. But with that, with that being said, don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, smash that notification bell like the Incredible Hulk so you get notified when our new videos go up. Once again, hashtag not a sponsor. And in the meantime, stay healthy, stay strong, stay safe, and remember that life is indeed better when reading. Take a look.
Famous Faces and Funnies in Melbourne, Florida is leading the way in pop culture fun. From comic books and graphic novels to Funko Pops and collector's items, Famous Faces and Funnies has it all. Rick Shea and the professional team at Famous Faces and Funnies are friendly and knowledgeable. Whether you're looking for toys, props, collector treasures, or a new comic book, Famous Faces and Funnies is your one-stop shop. To find Famous Faces and Funnies on Facebook and Twitter, just type at FFF Comics.
Sweet dreams they placed on me inside my mind. Chance my truth, twist the past, my memories are fading fast. Am I still missed? Who do you want me to be? Am I still missed?
In the summer of 1953, private investigator Will Lucky Marks was working as the in-house private eye for Arcane Pacific Pictures. Trapped inside the studio with the killer, Lucky must find the killer before time runs out. Lot 28. Own it today. Available iTunes and Amazon.com.
Choose high-flying action. Choose death-defying escapes. Choose spine-tingling thrills. Choose nail-biting intrigue. Now's your chance to choose the adventure. The Captain Hawkland Adventures. Available on Amazon.com. You've worked hard and written a great book. Now, it's time to give it a great cover. If you're an indie author or small press publisher, Plasmafire Graphics is your source for affordable cover illustration and graphic design. Plasmafire Graphics, when the look of your book matters to you.
Good morning! Oh, and in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.